Okay, picture this. It's a lazy summer afternoon. Suddenly, a little girl leaps up and starts chasing this frantic white rabbit down a dark, seemingly bottomless hole. She tumbles into this wildly chaotic world full of impossible riddles, grinning cats, and eccentric monarchs screaming, "Off with their heads!" For most people, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is just that, right? A beloved children's fantasy? Just a whimsical tale meant to entertain.
But what if I told you that whimsical surface is just an illusion? You see, for well over 150 years now, psychologists, philosophers, and literature buffs have suspected this innocent little story actually hides a much deeper and, honestly, slightly darker psychological allegory. Scholars have long believed that Wonderland isn't just some magical place born from random imagination. It actually represents something incredibly grounded and sometimes terrifying in human reality. It's a brilliant duality when you think about it. On the surface level, sure, it's a magical kid story bursting with talking animals and wacky tea parties. But when you look through the looking glass, the hidden meaning reveals Wonderland as a profound metaphor for the confusing, totally irrational journey of growing up. It's basically a mirror reflecting our own struggles to make sense of a world that often feels completely detached from logic.
Part 1. The Logician Behind the Madness.
To really grasp this hidden truth, we first have to look at the guy who engineered all this apparent chaos. The author we know as Lewis Carroll was actually a mathematician. His real name was Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, and this was a guy who lived and breathed structure, rules, and mathematical certainty within the super-rigid Victorian era. So when he spun this tale on a warm summer boat trip with 3 young sisters in 1862 and published it 3 years later, it wasn't just random. Knowing Dodgson was obsessed with logic is the ultimate skeleton key to this whole explainer. It proved the madness he invented was entirely, meticulously calculated.
Part 2. Falling into the Unknown. Everything in Wonderland starts with one sudden choice, Alice's split-second decision to follow that white rabbit. And that rabbit hole? It's not just a hole in the ground. It perfectly symbolizes leaving the comfort of childhood behind and plunging into the terrifying unknown. Think about your own life for a second. Every major life transition feels exactly like a rabbit hole, doesn't it? Starting a new school, leaving home, taking on a daunting new job, or just facing the sudden reality of adulthood. None of us really know what's waiting at the bottom of the drop. Alice's free fall into the dark captures that universal uncertainty we all experience when our world is about to permanently change.
Part 3. The Crisis of Identity.
Once she's actually down there, the external mystery quickly triggers this massive internal struggle. Alice finds that even her own physical body has become completely unstable. Throughout those early chapters, she's drinking potions and eating cakes, shrinking down to a few inches, then booming up into a giant, then shrinking back down again. On the surface, yeah, that's classic fairy tale magic. But symbolically, these constant size changes represent the turbulent emotional and physical roller coaster of growing up. Think about adolescence. It's almost like a kind of body horror for a child to feel their physical form and social standing just constantly shifting out of their control. You often feel either too small to be taken seriously or suddenly too big to be treated like a kid anymore. It is an incredibly disorienting phase of life.
And all of that physical and emotional instability leads to one of the most heartbreaking questions in all of literature. Who in the world am I? Alice desperately asks herself this when she realizes she can't even remember basic facts from her school lessons. Wonderland literally strips away everything she thought she knew about herself, forcing her to figure out her identity completely from scratch, which is exactly what the journey to adulthood does to all of us.
Part 4. Navigating an Irrational Society.
As the story scales up from personal identity, it starts peeling back the layers of societal pressure through Alice's interactions with these bizarre characters. Take the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. It's not just a wacky get-together, it's a closed loop. Nobody leaves, nobody actually finishes their tea. Time literally never moves forward because it's permanently stuck at 6 o'clock. This entire scene is a masterclass in satire. Dodgson was directly mocking the rigid, suffocating social customs of Victorian society, pointing out the absolute absurdity of trying to force strict, polite manners into conversations that make absolutely zero logical sense. Watching Alice try, and honestly fail, to navigate the rules of the Mad Hatter and the March Hare forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question about our own lives. What happens when we become trapped in routines that never really lead anywhere? How often do we sit at our own metaphorical endless tea parties, just blindly following social scripts and doing pointless routines just because that's the way it's always been done?
Part 5. The Philosophy of Nonsense.
Seeking an escape from all this madness, Alice searches for guidance. And this brings us to perhaps the most iconic clue in all of Wonderland, the Cheshire Cat. This cat is the very embodiment of ambiguity, the quality of being inexact and open to endless interpretation. He appears out of nowhere, vanishes piece by piece, and sometimes leaves only a floating, mocking smile behind. In a world where Alice desperately wants concrete answers and clear rules, the cat offers absolutely none of that. Instead, it challenges her to completely change her perspective.
There's this brilliant moment where Alice comes to a literal fork in the road and asks the cat which way she ought to go. The cat calmly replies that it depends a good deal on where she wants to get to. When Alice admits she doesn't really care where she ends up, the cat rightly points out that, well, then it doesn't matter which way she goes. It is such a profound philosophical truth hidden right there in a children's book. The road you take in life and the direction you choose depends entirely on having a goal. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there.
But suddenly, that quiet ambiguity is shattered by the arrival of the Queen of Hearts. And with her comes the most terrifying catchphrase in the entire book: off with their heads. The Queen is a figure of immense danger, someone who reacts with explosive, violent anger before she ever stops to think or gather a single fact.
She is the exact antithesis of what we expect from leadership. Instead of just authority built on wisdom, logic, and fairness, she represents raw anger, volatile emotion, and sheer unfairness. She is the ultimate symbol of irrational authority. To a child, and honestly, often to us adults too, the people in charge can seem exactly like the Queen. She's a stark, terrifying reminder that those in power can sometimes be loud, temperamental, and deeply unfair, rather than the just and logical leaders we so desperately hope for.
Part 6. The Master Plan of a Mathematician.
Taking all of these bizarre encounters into account, we can now step back and see exactly why a renowned logician deliberately designed a world that actively refuses to make sense. Lewis Carroll didn't just write nonsense for the sake of nonsense. He deliberately played with language, twisted logical fallacies, and subverted expectations to train the reader's brain. His master plan was pretty profound, to force us to question our assumptions and, remarkably, learn to actually enjoy the uncertainty. Instead of feeding us simple, neatly packaged answers, he created an intricate puzzle that forces us to think in entirely new, flexible ways.
And finally, Part 7. Why Wonderland Still Matters.
Welcome to the modern Wonderland, everyone. Growing up is confusing. Society feels intensely contradictory. Rules seem completely arbitrary, and we are all in this endless search for identity and purpose. At the end of the book, Alice eventually wakes up on the riverbank and realizes it was all just a dream. But the dream itself holds profound truth. The anxieties she faced are not just relics of the 1800s. These are the exact same challenges we all still navigate today. The surface world has changed, but the rabbit hole of the human experience, it remains exactly the same.
So, I want to leave you with this thought. If you fell down the rabbit hole today, what would Wonderland represent in your own life? What are the arbitrary rules or irrational characters that you are currently trying to navigate? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so let me know in the comments below. Keep questioning your assumptions, and I'll see you in the next explainer.